Greetings and salutations, folks, and welcome once again, as always, to another helping of Mr H's Hot Pot. You join me today, sat in the old jalopy, about to embark on yet another road trip to the town of Bolton, or Bolton, as we say here in Wigan. And I'm going to be going today to the Last Drop Village Hotel and Spa, which is located in the Bromley Cross area of Bolton. The reason I'm going to be going there today, Hot Potters, is to try and seek out the very spot where the late great Fred Dibnah famously crashed his beloved Aveling and Porter steamroller, Betsy, back in the late 1980s, early 1990s. Now, this is a story that Fred has told rather anecdotally at many after-dinner speeches on his TV series, and if you was lucky enough to catch him in the pub and buy him a pint, he'd have probably told you the story privately. Now, there is a video online that was uploaded about 9 years ago by a user named Edwin Bolas, and it's Fred giving an after-dinner speech for the Urmston and District Model Engineering Society, and it took place on the 20th of February 1993. And in that video, Fred tells the story of when he crashed his steamroller. Now, the video is about 58 minutes long, and Fred starts telling the story about 6 minutes in. And he does flesh the story out. He adds a lot of detail that I'm not going to be using in my video. I just want the key facts so that we can try and locate the area where he crashed his steamroller. But what I advise you do is you go over to Edwin's channel, and I'll put a link up now for you so that you can do that, and you watch the video in its entirety, because it is fantastic to watch Fred work an after dinner crowd. He really can tell a story, especially when he gets a few pints in him. So like I said, go over and watch the video in its entirety, or if you just want to watch the story of Fred telling the time he crashed his steamroller, it's about 6 minutes in. But I'd rather let Fred tell you the story himself and in his own words, because he can tell it better than I can, because obviously it happened to him. So I'm now going to leave you in the capable hands of Fred, and I'm going to make my way over to Bromley Cross in Bolton, and hopefully we'll be able to locate the very spot where Fred crashed his steamroller. So Fred, it's over to you.
I got this job dismantling some beautiful Victorian chimney stacks, you see, on a mansion up Charlie New Road outside of Bolton. And these chimney stacks were made out of beautiful blocks of stone, octagonal shaped, about 18 inches across, with a 9-inch hole chopped right through the middle. And, you know, a modern man would have hired a skip, belted them with a 14-pound hammer, sent the invoice down the road, you know, that's it. But somebody had worked really hard making these stones, and I thought, I'll save them. So I borrowed this trailer that weighed 3.5 tons and had no brakes. Now, I live in a funny place, so it's like down a very steep hill and very awkward. And it took me all Sunday to unload this trailer. So on the second trailer load, I thought, I'll sell these round the neighbourhood for garden ornaments, you see. There was 2 outside the pub, which I never got paid for. And then on the third and final trailer full, I got a phone call from a restaurant called The Last Drop, which is situated on top of a mountain outside of Bolton, you see. And the fella at the other end, he said, I believe you've got these stones with holes in. I said, yeah, but the hundreds of them, like polo mints, I don't know what to do with them. He said, well, we'd like to buy a wagon load off you. I said, well, how much do you give me? He said, we'll give you 80 quid. I said, you're on cop, delivered by steam power. There must be people here who've never been to this place, so I've got to digress and explain the road layout of this place, really. You know, basically, it's one road that goes right up to the restaurant. You go round the back onto the car park, do what you're doing up there, and then you come down a one-way street, like a slip road, that meets the main entrance road at an approximate angle of 45 degrees, where there is a cattle grid, a flagpole, a gas lamp, and various half beer barrels full of shrubs, you see. Now, we've got rid of the rocks, we've got the 80 quid, I wouldn't care if we could have had a pint, the bloody pub was shut. The thing is, we're at the top of the hill, we come round the corner, and in them days, they weren't as well off as they are now, and the field at the back were just muck and mud and ballast and anyhow rubbish like. And so the wheels had a fair amount of muck stuck on them. And we come round the corner, and Billy Greenhouse, she stood on the trailer at the back, the red lamps are lit, Young Webber's steering, he's 18 years old, he's working the handle, I'm working the regulator, and we set off down the hill at a fair lick of knots, you see. Billy Greenhouse realises there's something terribly wrong when he hears the swearing, and he jumped over the wall into the bloody field and let me and Webber go down the mountain. Now, being in hilly country, we've got both pins in, you see. Now, there's no way this engine's going to make this 45-degree bend at the bottom. Now, a steamroller entering a wet field at speed is like a bar of soap on a wet sink. You can't stop the bloody thing, you know. The thing is, if we go across the cattle grid and into the field is little more than twice the length of this room, and then there's a 15-foot drop into the back of a geriatric hospital. I've got visions of dead old ladies and bloody national health bedsteads. Anyway, the pillar, there's a big square pillar there. It's 4 foot wide, 2 foot thick, with a 4-inch steam pipe down the middle and the backside of a no entry sign on. That's got to take some of the bloody sting out of it all, you know. So we hit the pillar with the best metallic clang you've ever heard, like the Titfield Thunderbolt and Sid James hitting that engine. Same noise, you know, but it didn't stop it. It sort of started to take off like Concorde. Half of it set off up into the sky. And it's going along on the arse end, on the tender. The scrapes are still underneath to prove it. But the pillar, it cut the pillar off about 2 foot from floor. And the rear wheels finally came to rest on top of the pillar. Webber had disappeared, I don't know where he went to. The engine came down, you know, and the front forks broke into 3 pieces. The boiler dug a bloody hole in the road 18 inches deep.
So here we are at Potters at Last Rock Village, here in Bromley Cross, in Bolton. And to be fair, this area has changed massively since the day that Fred crashed his steamroller. Like I say, back in the late 1980s, early 1990s. The reason I know it's that time frame, Fred mentions in that after dinner speech about that steamroller, Betsy, which was originally named Alison after his first wife, caused a divorce. And we know that he divorced in 1985, so it's got to be between 1985 and when the geriatric hospital that he mentioned closed, which was 1991, so it's in between that time frame. He's never actually said, in anything that I know of, the actual year that that happened. Now, if you was to bring Fred back here today, I think he wouldn't know where he was, because quite recently, 2 housing developments have sprung up on this site, the Sanctuary and the Grange. Work began in 2022 on these housing developments, and it ended in 2024, and there's no people living in them. I'll just whip the camera around, and you can see those houses there. Those are the new homes that have been added to this site, and they were built by Jones Homes. And if you go back through Google Earth of this area, you'll be able to see how they have massively and drastically changed the landscape of this area, and as such it's going to make it difficult to try and locate where Fred crashed his steamroller. Now, luckily, Fred was last here in 2003. He was here for the BBC TV series Fred Dibnah's Age of Steam, and in episode 4, Steaming Down the Road, he actually tells the story and he shows us where the pillar was. It's since been rebuilt that he crashed his steamroller into. So we have it from the horse's mouth, we have it from the man himself. Now, one thing that Fred was very conscious of as he was losing control of his steamroller was the gradient of the road in front of me. Now, this road that you can see in front of me, back in the day, it wasn't as good as that, the tarmac. If he'd have continued down it, basically out of control, he would have ended up on Hospital Road, where that van's just pulled in. And had anything been coming either way, he would have just ploughed straight into it. And it's fair to say that a car versus a steamroller, which one was going to win? So that option was out. The other option he had was where today, you can see this house, that was a field back when Fred crashed his steamroller. The only little bit of the field that you can see today is this little patch of grass here. But as you can see, it's not really a very big field, even if that house wasn't there. And unfortunately for Fred, at the back of that house, there's a 15-foot drop into what was a hospital at the time. It was an active hospital. He does mention this in his after-dinner speech. He says that he had visions of bedsteads and old ladies and a big pile of ironwork and a big plume of steam coming up had he taken that option. If we take a little look here, you can just see the houses that have been built on the site. The hospital is no longer there. We will take a little look at the site in a moment, but you can just see the roofs of the houses there and the top story peeking out. So that gives you some idea of the sheer drop that would have been facing Fred had he taken that option. Anyway, we'll make our way down to Hospital Road, which is just down there, and the front, and we'll take a look at the site of what used to be the Blur Convalescent Hospital, which was used, I believe, during the First World War as a convalescent home for wounded soldiers that had returned from the First World War. Now, Blur Convalescent Hospital opened its doors in 1887 and it closed in 1991, and sadly, nothing remains of the hospital buildings today. All that's left is this wall that surrounds the site. That's original, along with those very distinctive red terracotta coping stones. The only other little reminder from that era are these gateposts here, which are stone and rather ornate. Now, the entranceway into this estate today isn't the original entranceway. The original entranceways used to be on either corner along Hospital Road. There used to be a lodge on the left-hand side and an exit on the right. And I'll put a photograph in now of what Blur Convalescent Hospital used to look like. And as you can see, it was very ornate. It's surprising that it got demolished to be replaced with this housing estate, to be honest, because it was one of the most distinctive buildings in Greater Manchester at the time. I think Fred would be quite heartbroken to know that the hospital was demolished, but there you go. The march of time and progress, or so they say. Anyway, I'm going to make my way back up to Last Rock Village now, and we'll take a look at where the actual crash happened. And here we are, Hot Potters. That pillar there, that's where Fred crashed his steamroller. And I've just watched a van come down here, one of these high-sided vans, and that struggled going down this gradient. So even today, it's still a very steep brew, as Fred would call it. Now, what would have happened if Fred had have just missed that pillar and continued? He would have come straight across here and ploughed through this house here if he was to crash his steamroller today. So he had very little options, and he had to think fast, really, because by all accounts, the fella who would come along for a jolly, a fella by the name of Billy Greenhalgh, he'd abandoned, he jumped off and left Fred to it. And the young lad who used to come round and do all of the driving with Fred, a fella by the name of Young Webber, as Fred used to call him, I think he'd also abandoned it. He just left Fred to it. So he had to think fast, he really did. And this is the road that he came down. Again, the camera doesn't do it justice, really, at the gradient. And according to Fred, this road wasn't as wide. It was only half of what it is today. You know, just enough for the steamroller to make its way down. Now, I don't know if these walls was here back in the day, and that's the one that Billy Greenhalgh jumped over when he left Fred to it or not. Who knows? But this here, this pillar, is the one that was rebuilt after Fred crashed his steamroller into it. I'll try and put either some screenshots or the actual footage of Fred talking about his time when he crashed his steamroller in the Fred Dibnah Age of Steam TV series. I'll try and put that in there for you.
I come down this hill and the road were only half as wide as what it is now, and it were a one-way street being pushed by a trailer that weighed 3.5 tons, and the wheels of the steamroller weren't even going round, you know, it was just like a big sledge. And by the time we reached this spot here, we were doing about 40 miles an hour, which is incredible for something like a steamroller or a traction engine. And of course, I'd got to do something, because if we attempted to get round the 45-degree bend, we'd never have made it. And over there, there's about a 15-foot drop into the back of an hospital. And I have visions of dead old ladies and twisted National Health bedsteads and maybe an explosion and a lot of steam. But then I saw that pillar and I said, aim for the pillar. And we hit the pillar, but it didn't stop the engine. The engine proceeded to take off up into the sky with the back wheels somewhere on the top of the stump of the pillar. I think it was a lot thicker and a lot wider. And of course, it's definitely been rebuilt because it's not damaged now at all. The thing is that the rear wheels were on top of the pillar and the boiler dug an hole in the road about there, about 18 inches deep.
And this is the speed bump that Fred stepped over when he was telling the tale, as he made his way down to the rebuilt pillar that he destroyed with his steamroller. Curiously, the one-way system works the other way than it did when Fred was coming down here. We'll try and take a closer look at the pillar. And there was just no way could Fred turn an out-of-control steamroller around this sharp hairpin bend here. There's just no way he would have been able to do it. Well, this is the pillar that's been rebuilt. This is where it happened. Apparently, he sheared it off. There was just 2 foot of it stuck out the ground. And the back end of his steamroller was resting on the rubble. And the front fork snapped. It snapped in 3 places and gouged out this area of tarmac here. I don't think those potholes are what Fred made. Well, this is the rebuilt pillar. Sadly, there's nothing on it today other than a sign telling you to drop your deliveries that way and that the hotel and reception are up there. Now, according to Fred, it was a lot thicker when he hit it, I should imagine. If he hit it today, it would just snap that like a matchstick. It would have probably come out to about there. Yeah, this is the spot where it happened. Now today, the Emerson Group own the Last Drop Village Hotel and Spa, and they've done a lot of building work on here. So, again, it's changed massively. They've done a lot of investment. And I don't know about you, Hot Potters, but I think that post, it should have some little blue plaque on it or something like that, just commemorating where Fred crashed his steamroller. Amazing. Amazing to think that this is where it happened. And fair play to Fred for quick thinking and saving a potential disaster, as there was an hospital waiting just behind those trees and houses. There we go, Hot Potters. Mission accomplished. That's the very spot where the late great Fred Dibnah crashed his beloved Aveling and Porter steamroller named Betsy back in the late 80s, early 1990s. And for anybody who's interested, that post is now located where Haydock Lane, which I'm currently walking along, meets Gledhill Way, which is part of that new housing estate that they've built. Now, one thing that has always intrigued me and fascinated me regarding this story is if any of those stone blocks that Fred had delivered here by steam remain on the site today. As I say, it's now owned by the Emerson Group, and they did a lot of building work on here, and they changed the layout of the site drastically. So I'm wondering if there is any of those stone blocks remaining. Well, Hot Potters, indeed there are some of those stone blocks still here at Last Drop Village all these years later, and they're located in front of the Harmony Suite. There's 4 of them just there. I don't know if you can make out on camera. I'll whip the camera around now and we'll take a closer look at these. And here they are, located in this little courtyard in front of the Harmony Suite. 4 little reminders of the time that Fred crashed his steamroller. One of them still doing the job that it was purchased for all those years ago. And on this one here, you can still see the blackened soot marks from when it was part of a chimney. Amazing that these are still here after all this time. So there we have it. Evidence that Fred Dibnah's story was true, if indeed anyone was doubting it. And I wonder how many people walk past these, leave tab ends in them and things like that, and don't realise the trouble that these caused. And that it cost Fred a lot of money, because he got £80 for bringing these up here, but it cost him £70 to replace the forks on his steamroller. And then no doubt he had to treat people, which means give people a little drop, say £10 here, £5 there for helping him out. Get his steamroller back to Radcliffe Road, where he lived. So he was definitely out of pocket with this. But there we go. There's at least 4 of them still here, Hot Potters. I don't know if there's any more. I'll have another little wander around and see if I can find any more, but it's amazing to think that there's still some here. Anyway, I'll whip the camera around now and wrap this video up, I think. Well, Hot Potters, I've had a walk around the rest of the village and spa, and sadly, those 4 that you can see there, they're the only ones that are remaining from that huge trailer load that Fred brought up here and ended up smashing his steamroller up for all those years ago. Real shame, because looking at them, I can see why Fred was reluctant to just throw them in a skip, smash them up and bin them, really. And as he said, a lesser man would have done just that, thrown them straight into a skip and sent them off to landfill. And sadly, it would seem that that's where the majority of those that were brought here have ended up. So if you want to come and take a little look at a bit of Fred history, you need to get yourself up here ASAP, because who knows how long those will remain there for. They're located in front of the Harmony Suite, and if you just walk along the road that I've come up where Fred smashed his steamroller, you'll find them just to your left. Anyway, that's about it from me. I'm now going to head off back to the old jalopy and head off back to Wigan to edit up all this footage, ready for your edification as always. I hope you've enjoyed today's video as much as I've enjoyed making it. But from a very windy Bromley Cross, I'm going to bow out. So, until the next time, from myself, Mr H, it is bye-bye for now.